Okay, so you want to own a Chick-fil-A. You've heard the number that gets repeated in every business forum and finance TikTok on earth. $10,000. That's it. $10,000 to become the operator of one of the most profitable fast food restaurants per unit in the entire industry, a chain that reportedly out-earns McDonald's, Subway, and Wendy's on a per-restaurant basis, despite being closed an entire day every single week. Sounds like the best deal in franchising. The lowest buy-in, the highest per-unit sales. A company so beloved customers write letters about the employees. But here's the twist almost nobody tells you before you apply. That $10,000 number isn't a low price. It's a warning sign that you're not actually buying a business at all. Chick-fil-A is not really a franchise company. It never has been, not in the way McDonald's or Subway are. The restaurant is the mechanism. The real business, the actual engine behind one of the most tightly controlled companies in American retail, is selection. Chick-fil-A doesn't sell franchises, it selects operators, and the moment you understand that distinction, everything about this opportunity makes a completely different kind of sense. Let's start with what everyone thinks they know. $10,000 in hands-on operator role, a restaurant already proven to outperform almost everything else in fast food, and there is real truth buried in that. Chick-fil-A restaurants have been reported to generate some of the highest average unit sales volumes of any quick-service chain in the country. Several $1 million a year at a well-performing location, despite operating 6 days instead of 7. You're not buying into an unproven concept. You're buying into a system that already demonstrably works better than almost anything else in the category. But here's where the dream and the reality split apart immediately, harder than with any other franchise on this list. What most people imagine is that $10,000 gets them a business. It doesn't. It gets them a job application, and an extraordinarily selective one at that. You do not own the building. Chick-fil-A owns or leases essentially all of the real estate and constructs the restaurant itself. Then places an approved operator inside it. You do not own the equipment. It belongs to the company. You do not own the brand, the menu, the supply chain, the technology, any of it. You are not permitted to operate a second location while running your first, a restriction almost no other major franchise in America imposes. McDonald's wants you to eventually run 5, 10, 20 restaurants. Chick-fil-A explicitly forbids it. One operator, one restaurant, full presence required. For as long as the agreement lasts. You didn't buy a franchise. You were assigned a single seat, and the company is still watching to see if you deserve to keep it. Now let's talk about what it actually takes to get that single seat, because the $10,000 figure is almost a rounding error next to the real cost, which is measured in years, not dollars. Chick-fil-A's selection process is famously difficult to get through. The company receives tens of thousands of inquiries a year for a comparatively tiny number of available operator positions. And multiple industry sources describe acceptance rates estimated well under 1%, lower than admission rates at some of the most selective universities in the country. The process typically runs through multiple rounds of interviews, background and financial checks, and an extended evaluation period working inside existing restaurants, sometimes stretching well over a year, before a candidate is ever offered a location. And here's the detail that shocks most people: the way McDonald's unpaid training program does. Much of that evaluation period is unpaid or minimally compensated. You are proving yourself to a private company for months, sometimes over a year, with no restaurant, no title, and no guarantee at the end that a location will ever actually be offered to you. $10,000 was never the price of entry. The price of entry was your patience, your references, and your willingness to be evaluated indefinitely, with no contract in hand. So say you clear all of that, and you're finally handed a restaurant. Here's where the economics genuinely diverge from every other major franchise, in a way that cuts both directions. Because Chick-fil-A owns the real estate and the equipment, the operator's own capital risk is dramatically lower than a McDonald's or Subway owner's. You're not carrying millions in construction debt. But the trade-off for that lower risk is a profit-sharing structure, unlike anything else in the industry. After operating expenses and a required contribution back to the company, the standard understanding of the arrangement is that the operator and Chick-fil-A effectively split the restaurant's net profit, close to down the middle, with a meaningful share flowing back to corporate, as something closer to a management fee than a simple royalty. Compare that to McDonald's, where royalties and rent typically total somewhere around 12 to 15% of gross sales, a real burden, but nowhere near an even split of what's left after costs. Lower risk, lower ceiling. You're not an owner carrying debt. You're closer to an extraordinarily well-compensated general manager, who also happens to have signed a multi-year contract. Let's put real numbers around it. Imagine a strong-performing Chick-fil-A generating $5 million in annual sales, a realistic figure for a well-located restaurant in this system. Food and packaging costs run a typical quick-service range, somewhere around 28 to 30% of sales, roughly $1.04 to $1. 5 million labor, notoriously demanding in an industry famous for its service standards, runs another 25 to 28%, roughly $1.03 to $1.04 million. Utilities, supplies, and other operating costs add perhaps another 8%, near $400,000. That leaves roughly $1.07 to $1.09 million inches operating profit before the split with corporate. Once that split is applied, the operator's personal take typically lands somewhere in the high six figures. Commonly cited industry estimates put a strong single-unit operator's annual income between $200,000 and over $400,000. An excellent income by any reasonable measure, achieved with none of the multi-million-dollar construction debt a McDonald's operator carries. A great year running one Chick-fil-A can outweigh a great year running one McDonald's, but there is no path to run a second one, ever, no matter how well the first one performs. And that ceiling is not incidental, it's the entire design, because you cannot scale horizontally, the way a McDonald's or Subway operator can. Building genuine multi-location wealth inside this system is structurally impossible for an individual operator. The company has built one of the most profitable single-unit models in American retail, specifically so that no single operator can ever become bigger, more independent, or more powerful than the corporation that assigned them the seat in the first place. Every other franchise on this list lets its best operators grow into an empire. This one is built so they never can. There is a real case that illustrates exactly how far that control extends, and it happened years before most people were paying attention. Joseph Horace, a longtime Chick-fil-A operator, had his operator agreement terminated by the company and filed suit in the Delaware Court of Chancery in 2010, alleging the termination was unjust, and seeking reinstatement, along with damages. He also separately challenged the loss of his leasehold interest in the restaurant premises, since the lease, like everything else in this system, ran through the company, rather than to him directly. The court denied his request for an emergency injunction. Whatever the eventual resolution of the underlying dispute, the structural lesson is the same one running through this entire business model. The operator agreement, the lease, the equipment, the building, all of it sits inside a legal architecture. The company controls end to end. When that relationship ends, the operator doesn't just lose a job, they lose the restaurant, the lease, and the equipment simultaneously, because none of it was ever actually theirs to keep. You can build the highest earning restaurant in your entire region and still walk away with nothing but your bank statements. If the relationship ends, the company itself remains privately held by the Cathy family, which is precisely why this model can exist at all. A publicly traded franchisor answering to shareholders demanding growth would almost certainly be pressured to let its best operators scale into multi-unit empires. The way McDonald's, Subway, and nearly every other major chain eventually did. A private company answering to a family, not a stock price, can instead optimize for a completely different outcome: maximum control, maximum consistency, and a permanent ceiling on any single operator's leverage, indefinitely, without ever having to justify that choice to an outside board. So, is it worth it? For the right person, someone who wants an exceptional single-location income, without taking on the crushing construction debt of a McDonald's, who is comfortable being evaluated for a year or more before ever getting a location, and who has no ambition to ever run more than one restaurant, this can be one of the best single-unit opportunities in American franchising. For anyone imagining a ladder toward a portfolio, toward the kind of 8-figure multi-location wealth McDonald's or Subway's most successful operators eventually build. This door simply does not exist here, no matter how well you perform. The restaurant was never really the product, the selection process was, and the operator who understands that isn't running a franchise. They're occupying a single carefully guarded seat inside a company that decided, deliberately, that no one operator would ever be allowed to become bigger than the family name on the door.